Let's be honest. At some point, we've all had a thought, strange, seductive, maybe even shocking, that made us pause and think, wait, is this normal? If you've ever found yourself wondering whether your sexual fantasies are weird, shameful, or too taboo to speak aloud, take a breath. You're not broken. In fact, you're more normal than you think. Hi there, and welcome. Whether you're here out of curiosity, reflection, or pure psychological interest, you're in the right place. Because today, we're diving deep into the hidden world of sexual fantasies. And trust me, you're not alone. According to a large-scale study by psychologist Justin Lehmiller, over 95% of people report having regular sexual fantasies. That's almost everyone. And when surveyed about the why, people weren't exactly shy with their answers. 69.8% said, "I fantasize simply to feel sexually aroused." Others added, "To escape reality, to fulfill unmet needs, or to explore things I can't talk about out loud." Let's break that down for a second. Most people fantasize not because they're strange, but because it's one of the safest places for their mind to play, imagine, and explore. In a world where real-life intimacy can be complicated, frightening, or out of reach, fantasy becomes a form of psychological refuge. But why do we really do it? Why does the mind return again and again to this private movie theater of imagined pleasure? To answer that, we turn to someone who knew a lot about the unconscious, Sigmund Freud. Freud didn't see fantasies as shameful. Quite the opposite. He believed fantasies were a natural expression of the unconscious mind, giving shape to our hidden desires, unmet needs, and even childhood longings. In his view, when we're unable to fulfill certain emotional or instinctual needs in the real world, the psyche redirects that energy inward, creating fantasies as a substitute gratification. This is what Freud called the fantasy life, a creative space where the repressed can come alive. So, if you've ever fantasized about something that surprised you, even disturbed you, Freud wouldn't have judged you. He would have said, "Good. Now we're getting somewhere." Because in fantasy, the truth isn't always about what you imagine, but why. Interestingly, Lehmiller's research showed another reason people fantasize: curiosity. In fact, it was one of the top motivators. People don't just want to feel pleasure, they want to understand themselves. They want to peek behind the curtain of desire and say, "Why do I want this? What does it say about me?" Here's the twist: it doesn't always say anything. According to modern psychologists, fantasies are often just mental simulations, not declarations of identity. They're safe containers for the things we're too polite, too scared, or too unsure to act on in real life. But that doesn't mean they're meaningless. Fantasies are emotional barometers. They reveal what you're craving: closeness, adventure, power, freedom, connection. And once you understand the emotional need behind the fantasy, you begin to understand yourself. So before we dive into some of the most common sexual fantasies, yes, the ones people are really having, remember this: fantasies are not flaws. They are tools. They are messages from the deepest part of you, disguised as desire. And if you listen closely, they might teach you more than any relationship ever has. Let's talk about one of the most misunderstood and quietly common sexual fantasies: homoeroticism and gender bending. You might be surprised, but this isn't something exclusive to LGBTQ+ individuals. In fact, many people who identify as completely straight have experienced fantasies that involve someone of the same sex, and that doesn't make them any less straight. So what's really going on here? According to a 2019 study published in Social Forces, 3.6% to 4.1% of men and 7.6% to 9.5% of women report having felt romantic or sexual attraction toward the same gender. And that's just the people who were willing to say so in a survey. The real number? Likely higher. But here's the key insight: having a fantasy doesn't automatically define your identity. Let's take a closer look at two related terms. Homoeroticism refers to feeling sexual attraction or desire towards someone of the same gender, whether or not you act on it. Gender bending, on the other hand, is about playfully or artistically expressing gender in ways that challenge cultural norms. Think drag shows, cosplay, or even experimenting with fashion or roles in the bedroom. These experiences are often emotionally charged, not because they're wrong, but because we've been taught to think they are. Sex therapist Deborah Fox explains that many heterosexual people have same-sex fantasies from time to time, and some even experiment physically. She compares human sexuality to a bell curve. Some people are very rigidly defined, but most fall somewhere in the middle, with flexibility and fluidity. So if you're straight and you've ever fantasized about being with someone of the same gender, you're not confused. You're human. And in fact, it might say more about your openness, creativity, or craving for emotional connection than your sexual identity. Here's another perspective. Freud believed that our fantasies often stem from emotional roots rather than concrete labels. A fantasy about same-sex intimacy might represent a desire for closeness, validation, tenderness, or equality, especially if those things feel lacking in your current reality. In this sense, a fantasy doesn't expose who you really are. It reveals what you really need. Psychologically, gender-bending fantasies might also reflect a playful rebellion against rigid roles. For some people, expressing the opposite side of themselves, their masculine assertiveness or feminine vulnerability, can feel incredibly freeing and erotic. It's not always about gender. It's about integration. So why is this such a common fantasy? Because it challenges limits. Because it invites self-discovery. Because it opens a doorway to parts of ourselves we've ignored or hidden. And most importantly, because your subconscious knows that the things you fear exploring are often the things that can liberate you the most. Now let's shift into one of the most tender, universal, and deeply human sexual fantasies: romantic sex. Out of all the fantasies people admit to having, this one may seem the most tame. No wild settings, no taboo scenarios, just you and someone you love in a moment of full connection. But here's the surprise. It's one of the most common fantasies in the world. According to psychologist Justin Lehmiller, author of Tell Me What You Want, a study of over 4,000 Americans revealed that 91% of straight men, 88% of straight women, and 87% of gay and bisexual men and women reported fantasizing about romantic sex with their current partner. That means the vast majority of people, even those we assume are more adventurous or less emotional, crave emotional intimacy in their fantasies. So why does this kind of fantasy hit so deeply? Because romantic sex isn't just about pleasure. It's about being seen. It's about safety. It's about sharing something sacred, not just a physical experience, but a moment of spiritual alignment. For some, this takes the form of candlelight, soft music, and long eye contact. For others, it's the slow, deliberate rhythm of tantric sex, an experience where climax isn't the goal, presence is. As described by Healthline, tantric sex is about slowing down, staying aware, and sharing energy. It's a dance of bodies, yes, but even more, it's a communion of souls. And for many people, that's the core of what they're actually craving. Not more orgasms, but more meaning. Freud had a fascinating insight here. He suggested that many of our sexual fantasies are masked expressions of unmet emotional needs. In other words, when someone fantasizes about romantic sex, they may not just want sex. They may want to feel chosen, to feel loved, to feel like they matter. This fantasy allows us to escape our loneliness, to rewrite the story of emotional neglect, to momentarily live inside a world where affection isn't withheld and vulnerability is not punished, but welcomed. And here's something powerful. Many people feel ashamed to have soft or vanilla fantasies. They worry that it makes them boring. But in truth, it may make them brave. Because in a world that prizes dominance, distance, and emotional control, longing for tenderness is an act of rebellion. If you've ever imagined being held, kissed slowly, or simply looked at like you're the most important person in someone's world, that isn't weakness. That's your inner self whispering, "I don't just want to be wanted. I want to be loved." And that's a need worth honoring. Let's end our exploration on a thrilling note, with the kind of fantasy that speaks to the wild, untamed part of you, the desire for variety, novelty, and adventure. It's that inner voice that whispers, what if it didn't have to be the same every time? This fantasy isn't always about kink or roleplay. Sometimes, it's just the yearning for something new. A new position, a new room, a new rhythm, or maybe something far more daring. Like having sex in a place where you're not supposed to. On the beach at night, in a forest clearing, even in a fitting room at a mall. Hey, we don't judge. Of course, let's be clear, Public sex is illegal in many countries, including the US. But the fantasy? It lives in your mind. And it's perfectly normal to crave the thrill of the forbidden, because your brain is wired to light up when something feels new. According to Cassandra Corrado, a sex educator with O.School, the thrill of the unknown is what turns so many people on. Facing the unknown triggers a dopamine surge, making your mind feel alive, excited, electric. This isn't just random. It's evolution. Our ancestors had to be alert and aroused by novelty, because the new could be dangerous or delicious. And Freud would agree. He believed our libido, the sexual energy within us, constantly seeks transformation. When we suppress that desire for change or expression, it doesn't go away. It just turns into fantasy. Fantasy becomes the mind's playground, a place to test drive the unlived lives you secretly crave. You might have a steady partner and a stable routine, but in your imagination, you're someone else. Confident, bold, uninhibited. The version of you that doesn't ask for permission and doesn't fear judgment. And that version? It needs somewhere to run, somewhere to feel free. That's where novelty fantasies come in. They remind us that desire is not always about need. It's about expansion, about reaching for the edge of experience and asking, what else could I feel? So if you've ever fantasized about being seduced in an elevator, or whispered to in the dark corner of a library, or surprising your partner in the middle of a rainy night on the balcony, you're not weird. You're human. Because sometimes, what you crave isn't just sex. It's aliveness. So, after exploring all of this, what if I told you that your fantasies, no matter how soft, wild, romantic, or taboo, don't make you broken? They make you human. You see, sexual fantasies are never just about sex. They are about needs, about curiosity, about emotional hunger and untold stories. Some fantasies are born from longing, some from repression, others from a part of you that just wants to feel alive, to feel seen, desired, understood. And the most beautiful part? You're not alone in any of it. Behind every fantasy, there's a truth worth listening to. So maybe instead of hiding from your fantasies, you could start learning from them. Because the more you understand what turns you on, the more you understand what your soul is really asking for. If this video helped you understand yourself just a little more, share your thoughts in the comments. Only if you're comfortable. Like the video. And don't forget to subscribe for more deep, real, psychology-centered content like this. You deserve to know yourself fully. And here, we hold space for that journey.